Well, good evening, everyone. I forgot that senior night is always the most social night of the year, because it's one of the first nights that parents and students get together in this room in the start of the year. So wonderful to have you here. And thank you so much for joining us. We know that there's a lot of information that's coming into your inbox these days with the start of school and back to school night. So we're really happy to have the opportunity to speak to the seniors and parents and guardians en masse, and in person for so many of you, though I know we've got a good number of folks that are online as well. We will record this and we will send it out. So if you want to watch it again and again, you are welcome to do that. But if anybody's missed it, you're certainly welcome to share it with them. I think most of you know who I am. I'm Carolyn Middleton. I'm the Director of College Counseling. I'm the person that floods your inbox often. And I want to introduce my colleagues. Most of you know Mr. Luis Almonte. And Ms. Joelle Chen. And not to forget, Ms. Mary Dunn. I feel so lucky. We're about to go to a conference in a couple of days. Next week, it's our national conference. So it's, you know, the friendliest 8,000 people you might imagine, all the admission officers and high school counselors all getting together and talking about this kind of stuff. But I feel so lucky because I have such a great team of people. And it just feels so good going into a year like this and being able to trust everything that my colleagues are doing and saying and all of that. It's not like that everywhere. So I feel very grateful tonight. I'm gonna start by just showing you what our agenda is. I just did the introduction, so check to the first thing on the list. We're gonna talk a little bit about communication with us, with colleges, students with your parents, parents with your students, kind of try and touch base on everything and try and give you a sense of the timeline. Many of you ask for deadlines. When should this be due so that it's ready to go? So we've broken things down into some timelines, and we really want to, we have all the same goals. We want those applications to be the best possible applications they can be, make sure that they're in on time, and that we're all ready for the responses when they come. We've got a few admission updates, things that are happening out in the admissions world, some logistics, so how this works, you know, making sure that you know how to sign up for visits and SCORE, making sure that you know that all of your schools need to be in SCORE. Make sure that you know that SCORE is pronounced SCORE, not Squire, like lots of folks want to say. Admissions and financial aid resources. I know we've shown you a lot of these throughout the time that we've been talking with you about college, but we want to make sure that you have the resources at your fingertips to find things quickly. I often am showing these to students as I'm sort of sliding on my chair over to the couch, kind of showing them on my computer. So we wanted to make sure we showed you a few things here to make sure that you know what resources you have at your fingertips. We want to talk a little bit about after submitting the application. We don't always talk about this, but you know, beyond what that submit, then what happens and what will you be waiting for and what kinds of things will you need to do? We have some final statements and then we'll turn it over to questions. So we're hoping maybe an hour. I think we've scheduled it for an hour and 15 or so. So we're hoping that we're able to get you out of here in time to maybe have some dinner and get home on time. You've been to these before, so you know I like to start with a little cartoon from our friends at the New Yorker. And I love this cartoon because it really aptly describes the start of the process, you know, the figuring out which colleges, getting that college list together, figuring out which are the reaches, which are the middles, which are the foundations, everything from that to filling out the activity sheet, all of the parts and pieces. If only it were so simple. There are so many metrics to consider, but honestly, making sense of these college policies sometimes can be complex. So, you know, the students know very often, and parents too, if I'm working with you, you'll ask a question sometimes and I'll say, this has been the answer for years, but let me double check on that for you. Because things happen, they change overnight. You see some notifications in Forbes or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times when colleges make announcements or when someone's arguing about something that a college is doing. But sometimes we have to get caught up on things too. So we know that it can be complex. And those of you that have had a student go through this process before, you know, and you can attest to the fact that once you have that list of colleges, and you're focused on those next steps. And if you utilize your resources correctly, and we refer to ourselves as resources too, the process can go very smoothly. And tonight we want to talk to you about how we can support you in making it feel less complex. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. Some of the parents and guardians may have heard about the case study program that we did during Reboot Camp, when we tried to reboot the seniors back into the college process after a long and luxurious summer. The seniors worked with 6 experienced admission officers from Sarah Lawrence College, from Barnard College, Connecticut College, Lafayette College, Wesleyan University, and New York University. And they analyzed 3 fictitious applications to a fictitious college we named Good College. Because where does everyone want to go to college? A good college, right? So the Good College was an amalgamation of many colleges. And in fact, the applications themselves started many years ago as 8 applications from Barnard that I actually had put together and made a case study for students that were visiting the university. They've since changed many, many times, and Ms. Chen has made some really great changes to it as well, putting them in the uncommon application. But we feel like students really had a chance to see what those applications look like. And they had criticisms for them, appropriately so. Their essays were not as good as your essays will be. I'll say that right now, without having read all of your essays, I know that. The applications in the college profile, like I said, were an amalgamation of characteristics, but they included multiple identities, they included lots of backgrounds, lots of stories, lots of contexts, experiences, and flaws. You know, things that we wanted students to notice and to either fight for in committee or point out and say, this may be a reason why we can't admit this student. So students started by examining the institutional profiles of Good College. You know, Good College indicated these would be important factors in their admission process. So they had to pull from the narrative what they thought might be important for the colleges to consider and what was important to them. And then students had the opportunity to read each of those applications, present their findings to their peers, argue a bit about the merits of their applications, and there were a few pretty strong arguments out there. And then they made a decision for which of the 3 applicants they would admit to Good College. What we hope the case studies did was to help students see that while the process is human, with people making decisions on those applications, arguing points and feeling passionate about the person that you are arguing for, some things are out of your control. You know, one year a college might look for classics majors, tuba players, point guards, you know, any students from any Dakota, or the college might be interested in increasing the number of female identifying students in an engineering program. They may have over-enrolled last year. Their applications may have gone up 50%, or they've built a new dorm. Like, all these things are things that we can't quite control. Sometimes we know about them, sometimes we don't. But it's sort of part of the process. It's the understanding that everything is not in your control, but then there are certain things that are. So we're definitely going to spend time talking tonight about those. I realize that the case studies can be somewhat of a simplistic assessment, right? There's never just 3 applications to one college. We've got, like, what, 2,500 colleges out there. You all will probably apply to about 200 different colleges. So there's quite a variety of colleges that you'll be targeting. And at the same time, I want to make clear that the opportunities that lay before us, the many things that we can control, the effort, the successes that we can put forth, and the practical steps we can take to compel those positive outcomes. So that's what the crux of tonight is going to be about. Sound good? Terrific. We don't have a part 2, so I'm going to talk a little bit about apples and oranges. I'm going to start this part off and then hand off the next couple of slides to my colleagues. I wanted to make the point early on that each student's application process is different. You know, we talked to the students quite a bit about, you know, that their information is their information. What they're presenting in their information is theirs. And I think you'll notice if you ask about, who was that on the scattergram? I'm not going to tell you who that person is, or, you know, the profile of a student that applied last year. I'm not going to tell you their names. We try and keep all your information pretty close to our hearts. Our cards stay pretty close in that way. But it's important for you to know that so much of our advice is really about the individual, right? Should I test or should I not? Should I submit my testing or should I not? Is an interview going to be important at this college? Is this story that I plan to share in my personal statement telling colleges enough about me? How much will finances play a role in admissions decisions at the colleges on their side? Do they meet full need? Am I a competitive applicant to this college, given my academic program, grades, et cetera? Should I apply early? I think you'll notice that we are wholeheartedly here to support your students, and students, we're here to support you. We're always going to be trying to be as clear as we can. We're always going to be honest, and we're going to tell you what's what, but we're also going to support you when you want to reach a little bit further. We're going to make sure that you've got some good foundations on your list that you really like, because some of this is unpredictable. All the answers to these questions that I posed just before might be a little bit different for different students, even those with similar profiles and statistics, if you know the statistics, which I hope you don't. No student or family knows exactly how the other applicants who apply from Berkeley Carroll are presented in their applications. You don't know all the parts and pieces of the application. You haven't seen the letters of recommendation, you haven't seen how it all comes together, and you don't see how it's read. We tried to give you a simulation of that and about the people that do that reading and the passion that they portray for their committee leader so that they will hopefully get their applicant admitted. But it's important still not to spend too much time speculating about someone else's applications, right? Know that we discourage students from asking each other about their test scores and GPAs. I think you agree that that's probably not a healthy thing. We encourage them to keep their list of schools somewhat private if they choose to do so, just because it's good to keep your information here, right? It's good to have yourself and have your close friends or your parents or your colleagues, you know, some close folks that you share it with. We also strongly recommend that they check the advice that they're inevitably getting from TikTok. So with that, I'm going to pass it along to my colleagues. Lewis,
All right, good evening, everyone. So I'm here to talk to you about the most exciting 4 months that you're going to be having of your life, with the college process coming up for fall of your senior year. So just to kind of show you, we've given you all that orange sheet, which all the students have access to. It's a list of important dates and reminders for the college process. But just breaking this down by month, we thought it would be very helpful to see a visual and talk these things through and expand on some of these points that we're making. So for the month of September, just to kind of keep you all in the loop, there was a first draft essay due date for all seniors. So if you have not done that yet, please do so. But the majority of essays we have received, and we're currently in the process of workshopping that with the students, editing them with the students, going over topics and rerouting any students that we feel is necessary based on topic, execution, things of that nature. It's really important at this point in time for students to be narrowing down and balancing their college list. Ideally, if you know what colleges you're going to apply to, you can take the next steps to start applying for those schools, whether that's writing the supplement, demonstrating interest, or completing a optional interview or an evaluative interview if it's offered. During this time in September, it's a good time to start scheduling some of your interviews. You can start that process now, or you can schedule them ahead of time if there's a calendar with future dates. But that'll allow you to at least solidify a spot to know that you're guaranteed to be able to complete an interview. If the longer you wait, the less spots there will be for you to be able to do an interview. For students that are applying for artistic programs, this is a good time to be preparing, completing your portfolio or preparing your audition and getting ready to execute that. And just to keep you all in the loop as well, starting in September up until November, we have tons of colleges, over 100+ colleges and universities coming in person to Berkeley Carroll to visit and speak with our students. So, you know, for those schools that are really far away or the student hasn't had an opportunity to visit the school, it's a great opportunity to stop by, meet the admissions representative, who more than likely will be the first person reading the student's application, as well as being able to demonstrate interest if the school tracks it that way, as well as being able to find out about new schools that may not necessarily be on your radar at the moment. So we highly encourage you all to attend those, sign up for those and attend them because they're very useful. And it's a great opportunity for you to ask the questions that you want instead of the general information session that you get when you visit a college or school. And then the final thing in September is on September 18th, your transcript release authorization is due. So the students should have taken that home and reviewed it with their parents. If you have not, this is a reminder to do so. But ideally, what you should be doing on that transcript is checking that all the classes are correct, all the grades are correct, all the credits are correct. And if anything funky is happening on that transcript, you want to let us know immediately so that we can rectify it. And then when you sign off on it, that is us giving us permission to send that copy of that transcript to your colleges and universities once you apply. So that's September in a nutshell. October is where it's grind time. So October is the funnest month in senior year for all of us. So for those applying for financial aid, the CSS profile is going to become available for you to begin completing on October 1st. Ideally, anybody that's applying for early decision or early action, you're going to want to complete this quickly and make sure that it's submitted by the financial aid deadline, which more than likely is going to be the same as an ED or EA deadline, which is typically November 1st or 15th. For all your early decision and early action schools, you're going to want to consult with your counselor at that point in time in early October to review where you're submitting testing, to review what your test score is, where you should submit it, and where you should apply test optional, because you should not be sending your testing everywhere unless it's towards the higher tier of the ACT and the SAT scores in terms of total. And also to review how to send testing. Some schools will want you to send the official test score, which means it has to be sent directly from the SAT or directly from the ACT. Other schools will accept a self-report from the Common Application. Other schools might want you to self-report through a form. So there's different ways that different schools want you to self-report testing, but we can review your list with you and come up with a plan so that you're informed and know what's going to be towards your benefit and how to do things moving forward. Your earliest deadline form and first supplement drafts are due October 2nd. So earliest deadlines, we need to know what schools you're planning to apply early to and what that's looking like. And then ideally, those early drafts for those supplements should be received around the first week of October. So that way we can start editing them and providing you feedback so you can finalize them for the November 1st deadline. Continuing with portfolio and audition planning, interview planning. And then we have a financial aid workshop with our partnership with Paul Martin, who is the president of College Money Method. And he is doing a program called Succeeding in Financial Aid. So if you're applying for financial aid, we highly recommend you to attend that program. It's going to be really helpful, especially as you are getting ready to complete the CSS profile and the FAFSA. And then your final essays, your final college essay draft and final supplement draft are due for early decision and early action by October 25th. And that will give you 1 week wiggle room just in case anything pops up. So we want to plan ahead in this process so that way everyone's less stressed. It's a smooth process and things are ticking the way they need to. The final thing is to update scores. So score is going to be really important throughout this entire process. Ideally, everywhere that you're applying in score should be in the applying column. And then when you decide to apply, you need to update that as well too, because that's how we get a notification of where you have applied and where we need to send your documents. If you apply to a school and don't put it in score, we're not going to know that unless we know offhand where you've applied and we add it manually, which we shouldn't be doing. It should be your responsibility. But we want to ensure that everything gets there in a timely manner and that your application is complete so that you can be reviewed. For November, the deadlines are going to be early decision and early action, typically November 1st and 15th. So again, we want to plan accordingly to make sure everything's ready to go by those deadlines. In November, you would want to consult with your counselor on where to send your testing and if you are sending your testing, how to send it to your regular decision schools. And then as soon as you apply early, you're going to take a short break. And then you're going to continue writing the rest of your supplements and the rest of your drafts, right? So you don't want to just complete your early decision school and just stop and then wait to hear back from early decision, because sometimes it goes really well. And we're all going to throw a party and congratulate you. But then other times it's not so great news, right? You might get deferred, you might get denied. So ideally, you want to make sure that everything else is ready to go. So that way, whatever that decision is, all your applications are ready to go. You can reroute. You get a winter break. We get a winter break. Everyone's happy. And ideally, we want all of your applications to be ready to go by December 15th. So this is your big reminder, you have to complete all your applications, even if you haven't heard back from your early decision school or early action school yet. Continue with portfolio auditions and interviewing, and then once we receive first quarter grades, we're gonna send them to early action and early decision schools. A strong senior year and upward trend can make all the difference, especially sometimes if a school is waiting to see a little bit more and they get your first quarter grades, that's more evidence that they can use to advocate for you to be admitted. So definitely keep up the work in your classrooms and make sure that you're doing really well, because you want a strong first quarter and a first semester, because that's the only thing that they're going to see from senior year. In December, the FAFSA becomes available. Fingers crossed, December 1st. Last year was a bit of a difference. But ideally, if you're applying for need-based aid, even if you've completed the CSS profile, you will still need to complete the FAFSA. And with both of those documents, they'll be able to determine how much you and your family will be eligible for in terms of need-based financial aid. Your absolute final college list and final supplement drafts are going to be due for regular decision on December 6th. And then that gives us 1 week of time to edit things, give them back to you, finalize them to be ready to go by December 15th. And ideally around December 15th is when you're going to be hearing from early decision schools and some early action schools. And like I said, best case scenario, you did all that work, but you got into your ED school. Other case scenarios is you didn't get in, maybe you got deferred, maybe you got denied, but everything else is ready to go and you're prepared. All applications for January 1st should be ready to submit again by December 15th. And then once your semester grades become available in late January, we send them immediately to all the schools that you've applied to. So this is a lot of fun awaiting in your future, and we're here to support you throughout this entire process. So there's a lot of moving parts of this the next 4 months, and one thing we want to remind you all is about communication. So this entire process is built on communication. And, ideally, the goal is you all want to go to a college that you're really excited about, that's your #1 choice, or that you're really happy about. But also recognizing the other parts of this process is you maturing as an adult and you maturing as a student and a young person. And one of the things that we really want you to focus on in this process is communication. So thinking about communication, you're going to be communicating with your family, with your counselor, with the admissions representatives at the schools, with your peers, and with yourself. So going through all 5 of these. In terms of addressing your families, in terms of communication, I want to remind you all that this is not the only thing that's happening in your student's life at this point in time. So we've said this before many times, but we highly recommend, scheduling times or maybe having a day where you're checking in about college, where you're checking in about the process. But we have found just by experience, when this overtakes the household and overtakes the entire relationship that you have with your child within that year, it can be very rough. And we want this to be a smooth process for everyone. And on the flip side, students, it's a really good idea to keep your parents in the loop, right? Like this, a lot of you are the driver in this process and you're kind of leading this process. But you have somebody that's a really big cheerleader and a really big support system and a really big resource in your own household. So, do what feels natural and figure out what those boundaries are. But at the same time, you also want to lean on each other for support. In terms of communicating with your counselor, that's super important, right? Because we are one of your biggest cheerleaders as well, too. We are here to advocate for you. We're here to do anything possible. And we're also here to give you really professional advice that's going to help make this process as successful as possible. So understanding where you're applying, when we reach out and we ask for you to schedule a meeting, that you do so, that you adhere to deadlines, that if we're creating deadlines and we're saying, hey, at this day, we need these 3 supplements for these schools, to make sure that you're trying your best to do that. Because again, we want to be mindful of making this process a healthy one and an easy one. It's very easy to mitigate stress in this process if there's a lot of communication between the counselor and the student. The third thing is that you're going to be communicating with a lot of admissions representatives. So you've been going on college tours, they've been coming to visit Berkeley Carroll, and you really want to put your best foot forward while you're interacting with these individuals, because they are in some way, shape, or form going to affect how your application is reviewed. Sometimes they're going to be the first person reviewing your application, right? So it's always great to, introduce yourself, put your best foot forward, have questions to ask, be really excited, be willing to learn, be willing to absorb information. All of that is things that we say, keeping an open mind and knowing what you're interested in is going to be a really guiding, big guiding point in this process. And then with each other, Ms. Middleton kind of touched on this, but being mindful that there's going to be a lot of different emotions that are happening this year within this space. Everybody's process is their own individual process. That's a very personal experience that some people may be willing to share and some might not be willing to share, and that's okay. Boundaries in this process are okay. Celebrating each other and celebrating yourself while also being mindful that somebody may or may not have gotten the best news is also really important. And then also being aware that you're all not applying to the same exact college list, so the processes are going to be different. Anxiety is very, very contagious in a high school setting. And I think talking through those things with your friend and recognizing what's someone else's anxiety and what's your anxieties can really make the difference. And then the final thing is how you communicate with yourself, right? So there's going to be a lot of news in this process, good news, bad news, neutral news, right? And really kind of understanding like how you take care of yourself in this process, how you communicate with yourself. And the biggest thing we want to say is that this process does not dictate who you are as a human being. This process does not dictate who you are as a student. You are so much more than like an 8 to 10 page application, right? And we completely understand that. And we hope that you understand that and the thoughts that you're internalizing and the experiences that you're internalizing, that you're communicating with yourself in a healthy and positive way. And if you find that this process is starting to wane on you, we ask you to lean on your support systems. So just kind of reviewing terminology. So we're all getting to the point where a lot of you are probably considering early decision 1 and early decision 2. So just to review that, early decision is a binding agreement. So ideally it should be your number 1 school. You're absolutely in love with the school and you want to propose to the school and you want a relationship with the school. And ideally you want them to say yes, right? So early decision 1, if they say yes, it's a binding contract, you are off the market. Early decision 1, the deadline is November 1st or 15th. You're going to find out by mid-December. Early decision 2 is the same thing. It's typically just at a later date. You'll apply in January 1st or 15th, and you typically find out mid-February. Early action and priority deadlines, I like to say are really great. So it's kind of like you're interested in somebody, but you're not ready to commit, but you kind of want to play the field a little bit and give them a little attention, right? So early action, you can apply, it's non-binding. You apply early, you find out a little early. You can apply early decision to 1 school. You can apply early action to as many as you'd like. If early decision 1 does not work out, you can apply early decision 2 to another school that offers early decision 2. So you have 2 really good shots with early decision 1 and early decision 2. Early action, you can do as many as you'd like. Unless you apply single choice early action or restrictive early action, which means some schools have these like Stanford, Yale. Basically what it's saying is you can only apply to this school single choice early action or restrictive early action, and you cannot apply to any other school in an early round that is a private institution. Most of the time, that's the language that they say. So it would be good to consider public schools that you might be interested in wanting to send applications out in conjunction with that single choice early action or restrictive early action deadline. And the final one is regular decision. That's just the overall general process. You would apply in January and then you would find out in early to mid-March. So how to kind of make a distinction for these things is ideally early decision should be your clear first choice. It's the school that's at the very, very top of your list. In making that commitment to early decision and taking that shot, usually the biggest thing that's going to be taken into consideration for the most part is financial aid. So a lot of times families don't feel comfortable applying early decision because they don't know what their financial aid package is going to be. So we encourage you all to use the net price calculators to get an estimate of what you might receive in financial aid. And that way you can determine if you feel like it's financially realistic to apply early decision. If a family that's receiving financial aid applies to a school early decision, and you're admitted and you get your financial aid package and it's just an extreme amount of debt, the school is gonna, like 95% of the time is gonna be fine letting you go from that contract. But then that voids the admissions decision at that point in time and you wouldn't be able to get that decision back. So we definitely we encourage students to apply early decision because it does make a big difference. You know, half the spots, 50 to 60% of the spots are given away in early decision. So regular decision becomes much more competitive. And typically there's some times where ED gives that student that push that they can be admitted in the ED round. But by regular, it's probably going to be like extremely more difficult or possibly unlikely. So early does make an impact. There is an advantage in applying early decision. You're the first round of applications that are seen. They're taking the majority of their class in that round. You are giving them the largest form of demonstrated interest that you can give to a college or university, which is saying, if you pick me, I will come here. So that is very enticing for colleges that are reviewing their applications. I will also say that it's very, very common for us to see a lot of students apply early decision or early action or both. So you're gonna hear your counselors say, hey, this school has early action, you should apply early action. You should listen to us to be quite frank. So think of early decision as like 5 bonus points on your application, and then early actions like 1 or 2, right? So it still gives you a slight boost, it still gives you an advantage. And even some early action schools, a lot of times students are like, well, it's early action, I could just do that one regular and write the supplement later. But there would be a benefit if you did it in early action, and you can see that from the data that we have in SCORE, which we're happy to go over with all of you. So if your counselor is telling you, hey, you should apply early action, highly consider it. Or please just do it. In terms of final list of colleges, so we like to say that there's no rhyme or reason to this. Everyone's final college list is going to be extremely different. So the average for the class of 2024, the average number of colleges that they applied to was 15. The year before, the class of 2023 was 12. I think if you land anywhere between 12 and 15, that's a really good number. So in terms of what that breakdown looks like, it's going to look different for every student. Sometimes it's 4, 4, and 4, like 4 foundations, 4 middles, 4 reaches. Other times it might be 3, 3, 6, right? So it's all going to vary from student to student. I think what's really important is touching base with your counselor, reviewing data so that we can see like, we feel really good about these foundations and these middles, and discuss the reaches a bit more since those are the more difficult ones to get into. But ideally, every school that ends up on your list, you should be very happy to be a student at one of those colleges or universities. You should not be adding a school to your list because you need a foundation or because you need a middle. If that is the case, you should probably have a conversation with your counselor to take those schools off your list and find ones that you like and put them on there. But yeah, and I would say like in my personal model, and I think a lot of us can say this, a really strong college list is one that has a really strong foundation, right? If you have foundations that we think are gonna work out really well, that you are very happy and totally fine going and being a student at, it's that foundation will be able to support the middle and the reaches if you're taking a larger shot. So, you know, assessing your college list and looking at balance is extremely important. When you submit your final college list, basically what happens is myself, Ms. Middleton, and Ms. Chen, we all sit down and we look at every student's college list to look at the balance and put our minds together like a hive mind, and we assess it. It's kind of like an audit. And then if we see that there's an imbalance, then the counselor goes back to the student and says, hey, we've seen this collectively. This is what we're recommending, which will add more success to your process by the end of this process. So there's a lot of things that are coming up the pipeline. Parents, we know, like, you know, a lot of you have this information. Some of you might be hearing some of these things for the first time. What we also ask is, you know, as you see that the next couple months are going to get extremely busy, if parents want to touch base about their students' decisions, their students' lists, ED, things of that nature, we're respectfully asking if those conversations can happen a little earlier on in October, because that final week of October is grind time, where we're meeting with students basically every day, all hours of the day, every appointment is basically booked, and we're finalizing writing, we're finalizing essays, we're walking them through the application. So if we can have those conversations, I'd say like early to mid-October, that would be ideal for us, but we're more than happy to partner with all of you and provide you with any information and answer any questions that you all have throughout this process. So I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Chen, and she is going to talk to you about some exciting things.
All right, hopefully exciting things. So I'm here to talk a little bit about updates in the admissions world, as well as some fun logistics. So want to talk about things that I think are on the forefront of our minds as college counselors, but also seem to be on every news update that I get on my phone from the New York Times. So in particular, I wanted to start by talking about standardized testing. So as many of you know, in 2020, a lot of the colleges, the majority of colleges went test optional. And this past spring, a couple of colleges returned to requiring testing. In particular, a couple of Ivies, not all of them, Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, and Cornell for this year still is test optional. And a couple of selective other schools like Caltech and MIT returned to testing. What was interesting is not every school had the same reason for doing so. For MIT, they were looking at their own research and thinking about diversity building in their class. For other schools, they had other perspectives of why they were bringing back standardized testing. But it is not a mass return to requiring testing. In fact, 1,900 schools still remain test optional. And for all the students in this room, you might have heard it when we had our big panel, Ms. Middleton mentioned, where we had those 6 admissions officers, each one of them representing test optional schools said, test optional means test optional. They do not privilege or bias against requiring testing or students who submit testing versus students who remain test optional. And then there are 85 plus schools who are test free, meaning if you submit testing, they're not looking at it. So in particular, the UC system is very big on that. They will not look at any test that is submitted for their system. So testing is here, but it's going to vary for each student. So as Mr. Almonte mentioned, talk to us about what you want to do when it comes to testing. It might be some schools you submitted, some schools you don't, but it might be a factor and it might not. That's that apples to oranges piece Ms. Middleton mentioned earlier. We also wanted to touch on the Supreme Court decision that came out last spring in regards to race-conscious admissions, or how it's often known as affirmative action. So class of 2024, this past graduating class, was the first class in which race and ethnicity could not be a factor in the admissions decision process. Students can still talk, and we encourage students to talk about their lived experiences and how their identities may or may not have impacted their lives, but it is not seen on an applicant's file what race or ethnicity they select if they choose to select it. So colleges are slowly starting to share what that Supreme Court decision had, if it impacted, and what effect it had on their class. And there have been changes across all races and ethnicities. But what we really want to reaffirm and make sure that all students and families understand is you still have opportunities to share your stories. And in fact, a lot of colleges prior to this, I was working at NYU prior to joining, and we kind of knew something like this was coming down the line and starting to think of how would we still be able to understand students' stories and experiences that are so impactful for them. And Chief John Roberts actually said in his statement that that is still something that can be reviewed in the process. So many schools, you might see this, especially for the students who are starting to gather their supplements for their colleges, questions around community. So a lot of schools are asking, what are the communities that have shaped you, the communities that have built you up, that are impactful for you? And this is a question that all students should be comfortable answering. Yes, it might be race or ethnicity, but it might be the community of New York City that shaped you. It might be the community of gamers that has shaped who you are. So it's your opportunity to share your lived experiences and identities in your application, and your college counselors are here to help support you in that. So as I mentioned, I'm also here to discuss logistics. So I'm going to talk about a website that's going to become your best friend, hopefully not your worst enemy, but SCORE. So SCORE is the website in which we organize a lot of our materials in order to send them off to the colleges you are applying to. So students, you might have gotten comfortable with it already. For any parents and guardians in here, you should have received an invite to join SCORE last, I know it's been like a while, last like January when we were having our junior meetings. Can you believe that was a year ago? And so if you haven't already made an account as a parent or guardian, please do so. At least one person needs to, because for students applying early decision, Student has to fill out an ED agreement that has to be signed by at least one parent or guardian and by one of your college counselors. So log into that account if it's just been sitting there. You haven't thought about it for a couple of months, just to make sure that you still have access to it. But what you can see up here is kind of what Ms. Middleton and Mr. Almonte mentioned about moving schools into the applying column. So you can see Bard, University of Vermont. You want to move those schools, if you have not already, that you know I'm applying to, in the applying column. When you move it over, you will be asked to input your Common App ID number. If you have not yet created a Common App, we're going to have to backtrack a little bit. You need to create a common application. When you create that, you'll get a Common App ID number. You're going to copy that from the top right, put that into SCORE. You're also going to put the email address that you use to create that Common App account into the kind of school section when you're moving it over. You're going to select, am I doing early decision, early action, regular decision, ED2, single choice, is it rolling admissions? This also helps to keep you organized, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But this can be really great because it will populate the deadline for you, and it will also send you reminders. So want to make sure that's updated. Something else that SCORE is helpful for. So we have almost, I think, 100 colleges that have registered to visit Berkeley Carroll. These are schools that are interested in our students. And this is a great way, as Mr. Almonte said, to show interest for a college, but it's also great to be able to learn more about a school. You might walk away from that visit being like, I hate that place. Nowhere I'm applying. Or you might walk away from a visit for a college that you didn't even know is now your top choice. So you want to use it as information gathering. Register 2 business days in advance. In particular, if you have a visit that conflicts with class is the priority. You need to request, and seniors have already heard me say this multiple times in a grade meeting, but just to reaffirm it, you need to request from your teacher's permission to attend a visit if it conflicts with a class. They have every right to say no, and in that case, you could reach out to your counselors, and we are happy to indicate interest for you and gather a bunch of materials and talk to that rep and hype you up. So just make sure you do what Mr. Almonte said, which is communicate. All right, getting organized. That is so essential in this process because for whatever reason on the college admission side, we like to make it complicated, have a lot of random deadlines, have a lot of different types of titles for single choice early action, early decision. So how do you keep yourself organized? So in your SCORE drive, so for students, if you're in SCORE account, you go all the way to the bottom, there is a college research organization spreadsheet looking just like this with even more sections. It can help you get organized. You can edit it. You can make it all pretty and beautiful colors and make it look and work for you. But that is a great template to start with. In particular, what I want to highlight, searching to see if interviews are offered, how to register for them, and the login information. Once you apply to a school, you have to check those logins. So you want to make sure everything is in one place. Thinking about interviews in particular, demonstrating interest can be really important for some colleges. So this is a great example of a school where if you're looking on their website, they have campus visits, interviews, and even virtual programming available. Use the school's calendars and events to organize yourself and do so early. So if you look at this school right now, they're already filled up a little bit with their virtual programming, but they got a lot of space right now. I guarantee you that space will fill up in October. So start to look on those schools to see if you need to do interviews, if you need to demonstrate interest. Using these virtual offerings or those in-person interviews or virtual interviews is very helpful. Another piece of that organization, you probably heard myself, Mr. Almonte, and Ms. Middleton say this over and over again, so I apologize, seniors, but a supplemental essay doc, where you should be putting all of your supplemental questions. So for the families in the audience, supplemental questions are questions that are school specific. So they have a personal statement that they're working on, but that supplemental might be that question from Connecticut College that's asking why Connecticut College. You want to organize it. It should be one document. Make it really easy for yourself. And in that should be the deadline for the school and the word count and the question it's asking. This will make it so easy for you to go back in, because what you'll start to see is a lot of questions are similar. So you're not going to copy, why I'm applying to Connecticut College is going to be the same as why I'm applying to Wesleyan University. That you don't want, that would not look good, but you will be able to kind of repeat some of these questions and kind of craft it to that school to make it easier for yourself. Don't feel like you have to start from scratch for everything. But these are steps to get you organized. If you are ever concerned, you're like, I just feel like I have a lot of moving pieces, we are here to help and collaborate to make sure that you feel prepared going forward. And last, I love to highlight some of the resources we have. So the College Counseling Resource page, I'm actually going to click onto it and get outside. So this is an incredible page with everything you need. You all have access to it. It's in the bottom of Miss Middleton's emails, at all of her emails she sends out. But it has so much information, including research opportunities and tips, opportunities, links to schedule time to meet with your counselor. So this is those Calendly links. And it also automatically will generate a Zoom link if you're deciding to meet with us via Zoom. Lots of information here in terms of researching for scholarships, looking and researching institutions. In particular, I like to highlight this section. You can see, does this college consider legacy? Does this college offer interviews? Do I have to self-report, or can I send testing? Does this college demonstrate interest or consider demonstrated interest? So lots of resources in here, and also recently updated. If you go to the drop of events, you can read and listen some books that we recommend. There are a lot of books out there we don't recommend, so you can see some ones that we trust here, as well as some articles, some conversations. And then if you really want to come back and hear our incredible voices and our notes today, you could go to event recordings. I'm going to move this down one more time, and you'll see all of our events that we've hosted in the past as well. So again, a great resource. If you have questions, it's probably in here, but also never hesitate to reach out, okay? So I'm going to pass this over to Ms. Middleton to talk a little bit more about financial aid.
I wanted to talk a little bit about both need-based aid and a little bit about merit money, merit funding, merit scholarships. We've been sort of talking about these forms and mentioning them real quickly. The free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA form, is the one that's available December 1. It did come out late last year. It had a bunch of problems last year. We're hoping that that is not the case this year. This is the form that's required by all colleges. So if you're applying for financial aid, this is the form that they're definitely going to require. Many private colleges and universities ask for additional information. They want to know a little bit more about your assets. They want to know a little bit more about your information overall. And so they will also require the CSS profile. That form comes available October 1, sometimes a little bit before that. There may be a few more asking for this form this year. I know, for example, University of Vermont, which is not a private university, already announced that they're going to be requiring this form if you're applying for financial aid. And it's purely because of the timing of the FAFSA form and the delays that they saw last year. So these are the two forms. Right next to that, you see College Money Method. And Mr. Almonte mentioned this organization briefly before. College Money Method is an organization that we partner with that does actually developmental programming for financial aid. Financial aid programs for 9th grade families, 10th grade families, 11th and 12th grade families. They actually do 2 for 12th grade families. And the first program that they're going to do is on October 8th at 6:30. It's a Zoom program. In addition, they will post the video. They will post all of the resources that they utilize. They provide lots of information for you to learn about financial aid and learn about the steps that you need to take to be able to get a great financial aid package. Colleges will use prior year tax information. So often if there's anything that's happened that's new in the last couple of years, you want to communicate that information to the financial aid officers. So directly to financial aid, not necessarily to admission, but to financial aid. You can always reach out to them and ask them if they have a preferred method. Generally, there's little sections on those forms where you can write not very detailed information, but you can give them a heads up for information. And then often they'll require that you submit a letter if it's more detailed information that you need to submit to them. So that's an important thing to keep in mind overall. The resources and the programming, I mentioned College Money Method programming, that first program that we're doing on October 8th. There's also going to be a follow-up program that's about appealing financial aid packages. So if you get back a financial aid package and you're really not sure that you can make it work, resources are available. The guidance that Paul provides is really expert. So he will help you to craft letters, provide sample letters for you. He's really, really very knowledgeable. And we're pretty lucky that we get to work with him. So I will send out you have a reminder about this program, but I will send out the full list of programs in the next couple of days. The net price calculator that Mr. Almonte mentioned a little bit earlier, that's a tool that colleges provide to you. The net price calculator you'll find on every single college campus, every single college website. If they receive Title IV funding, they're required to have it. It's a simple tool though. It's not as detailed as the FAFSA. It's not as detailed as the CSS profile. It can give you some indication of what you're going to pay for college. So it can give you an estimate for what your financial situation might look like if you enroll at that college. But I also encourage you, once your list is small enough, communicate with the financial aid offices. Take a screenshot of what you've entered. Make sure you keep that information so that when you're communicating with the financial aid offices, you can ask about the other kind of information that you may not have been able to enter into that simple form. It's also not a smart form. It doesn't recognize foreign currency. It may not recognize or understand divorced and separated situations. So it's always best to have a conversation with the folks that are the experts in the financial aid office. Paul is also available. Paul Martin is also available to have one-on-one conversations. So we will send more information about that. But those financial aid officers, this is what they do. They're friendly people. They're pretty knowledgeable. So we want to make sure that you have those resources at your fingertips. If you're looking for scholarships, merit, artistic, activity-based scholarships, I often have families that say, well, how can I just apply for something that isn't need-based, but maybe I can get a few extra $1,000 that would help to pay for not only my son or daughter's education, my kid's education, but maybe the next kid that comes along, maybe the younger kids that are applying as well. In most cases, the less selective colleges, so not the most selective out there, most selective colleges typically don't have any merit funding, but those that aren't as selective as those most selective often have money that they will provide as part of an offer of admission. You know, part of doing that is enticing you to come to their college. So often I'll have families that say, we opened up the envelope or opened up the email and wow, there was $5,000 there, guaranteed for every year. Every little bit helps, right? So it may not be a huge number, but that information could be just no application required, could be coming right with your application. I visited Earlham College last spring, was one of the colleges that I was asked to come and visit. It's in Earlham, Indiana. They give $30,000 to every student that applies and is admitted. It's pretty amazing the kind of funding that colleges can sometimes provide to entice you to come. It's tuition discounting. It's really trying to draw you to their campus. Athletic scholarships, the two divisions that offer athletic scholarships are Division I if it's not an Ivy League college, or Division II. And then there's all sorts of other outside scholarships. That resource that Ms. Chen just showed you has links to all of these scholarship sites that I've listed here. FastWeb is probably one of the most important ones or one of the most popular. Everything gets thrown onto FastWeb. If I were filling out these FastWeb forms, I would probably use a secondary email, not the one that I use on an everyday basis, because you will get a lot of information. Going Merry, for those of you that are receiving financial aid, I automatically put your names into Going Merry. It's another scholarship scholarship site. And they actually do a great job of clustering information, centralizing it like a common application. So you don't have to fill out the same general information again and again. And then the last few are actually scholarship sites that are specific to historically Black colleges and universities. So if you have some of those colleges on your list, traditionally they have not as robust financial aid packaging, but lots of financial aid packaging that might be available, or scholarships that might be available through organizations and through these sites. That's a little bit about financial aid, and I'm gonna pass it back to, I think, Mr. Almonte. Thank you.
All right, so as we get towards the end of the presentation, we just want to inform you all what happens after you submit the application, because we talk so much about preparing the application and getting ready to apply. We also want to loop you in on the entire process. So before, we kind of mentioned this, updating your applied list and score, just to repeat it one more time. Score is for all of you to keep track of what you're doing and to do research. And for our office, it's to send your documents. So we upload all of your documents into Score, and with the flick of a button, it automatically sends it to your colleges and schools. That list needs to be updated for us to ensure that your documents are getting to your schools. Once you apply to a school, you're gonna get an email from every single school that you apply to. And the school is gonna ask you to set up something called an applicant portal. An applicant portal is basically a portal that you can log into for every specific school, where you can see the status of your application, if anything is missing, if your application is complete. Sometimes you can report your testing there. You can request an interview. So it's a nice little hub. And then eventually, when admissions decisions are released, they're updated in that portal for every school. So if you're applying to 12 schools, you're gonna have 12 portals for 12 different schools. Your portal is really important because if something is missing, we need to know immediately. We do not have access to your portal. So you have to monitor your portals frequently and let us know if anything's missing, and then prompt us to send it again or send it in a different manner. So that way we can ensure that your application is complete. If you have a portal and you've applied and you did not check your portal, or did not set up your portal, and your application, something is missing, your application's incomplete. If it's incomplete for too long, it's not gonna get reviewed. So it's really important that you do your part of the job so that we could do our part of the job to make sure that everything is good to go with your applications. For some of you, this is typically if you're applying to a large public institution. After you apply in that portal or via email, you're gonna get prompted to do something called a self-reported academic report, an SRAR, some people call it a SRAR. It's really annoying, to be quite upfront, but basically you have to go in and, for this particular school, input your entire transcript and then submit it. And what colleges are using that for is they're basically using the SRAR to calculate a GPA on their end in a manner that's consistent for everybody that's applying. So not everybody has to do this, but we wanted to introduce you all to this now because it does sneak up on a lot of students. I believe we're going to be doing like a lunch to go over how to complete the SRAR. But for any students that see this, or if we know that you're applying to a school that has an SRAR, we will definitely notify you and ensure that you complete that on time. So once you press submit, the applications fire off, they get reviewed. And then after a decision is released, there's a couple things that can happen. If you're admitted, awesome. If you're admitted and you decide where you want to go, you want to confirm your enrollment with that school. So you have to accept the offer and say yes. And then typically you have to pay a non-refundable enrollment fee that can range anywhere from $500 to $1,000. After you pay that, that basically solidifies your spot and holds your spot in that class for the upcoming year. And then they start communicating more information to you about housing, orientation, picking classes, things of that nature. But that all happens once you say yes, you're confirming your enrollment with the school. Once you know where you're going, ideally you should withdraw all your other applications. If they're active applications, it's good to withdraw them because that opens up another spot for a student at Berkeley Carroll or in the larger applicant pool of everyone that's applying for your year. And then if you have already been informed that you've been admitted, You can also inform them and say that you're not attending, and then they understand what their class is shaping up to be like in terms of their enrollment. If you apply ED, you are required to withdraw all your other applications because you've been admitted to your ED school. That's extremely important. You never want to get admitted to an ED school and then try to wiggle your way out of that contract, because sometimes, I mean, all the time, they're basically going to say no. And you can tarnish the relationship between the school and Berkeley Carroll, which is going to affect all of our other students moving forward. So we want to go through this process with integrity, with honesty. So when you're admitted to your school, you're signing an agreement that's saying, I'm withdrawing all my other applications, and it's basically like a binding legal document. If you're deferred, so basically if you apply early decision or early action, if you're not admitted or not denied, sometimes they might say, we kind of like you, we really like what's going on in your application, but we want to see more. So they might move your application from an early round to be reviewed again in regular. If that happens, typically they want to see you in the context of the larger applicant pool, and they want to see first semester grades. So if you get deferred, you want to consult with your counselor, because typically the stickiest situation is you've applied ED somewhere, and if they defer you from ED to RD, that voids the ED agreement. So you'd be open to possibly applying ED2 to another school, or just writing out the rest of your applications in hopes of that ED school that got deferred to RD working out in the long run. That's probably the most difficult situation that happens when you're deferred. Also, when you're deferred, we're going to consult you on writing a letter of continued interest that you can send to these schools, so that way they can see that you're still really interested and use that in their review when they review your application for the second deadline of regular decision. If you're waitlisted, sometimes that's going to happen too. If you're waitlisted, there's some schools where basically all schools are going to say, do you want to accept your spot on the wait list? If you want to be considered on the wait list, you have to say yes. So that's an action that you would have to take. And then again, if you're waitlisted, you would also want to send another letter of continued interest to show that you're waitlisted, that you're super interested. And then hopefully if they hit the wait list and they're gauging who wants to come, you've shown interest, and they're going to probably try to get you first because you're excited and enthused and telling them that you are interested and willing to attend. So there's a lot of different outcomes that can happen in the future. We'll talk about all of these situations individually with all of you as it unfolds, but just to kind of give you a snapshot of the possibilities is always helpful. In the spring, there's something called admitted student events. So if you are admitted to a college or a university, they typically have a really big event where they invite all the admitted students to come to a select number of days where you can come, and they roll out the red carpet. They have really great events. You can connect with faculty, you can connect with admitted students, you can connect with current students. And that's a tool to help you make a decision on where it is that you want to go if you're riding out this process to the end of regular decision. So those are really great opportunities. And sometimes those are really great if you weren't able to make it to, say, California to visit a school, or Florida or Texas to visit a school, that you can do it during those admitted student events, although you're still demonstrating interest and doing everything virtually that you can now. From there, you also at the end of regular decision, you can compare and contrast financial aid packages. And then like Ms. Middleton said, if you got a financial aid package, but it's not realistic, or you're hoping for a little bit more, you can request a financial aid appeal. They'll review the information that you sent them, and sometimes they might increase your package. Other times they might say, this is all that we can give you. But there have been times where we have seen financial aid packages increase. I remember one time there was one that increased by like $10,000. So it really is case by case, and it's really beneficial to be able to do that. And then finally, after you submit your application, the main thing we're going to do is we're going to celebrate. So everyone's going to experience success in this process in some way, shape, or form. It might not look exactly how you planned, but that's the beauty of this process, is that it's ever changing. It's helping you adapt. It's helping you make adult decisions. And if every school that's on your list you absolutely love and you'd be happy going there, everyone will be happy at the end of this process, even though they might have been aiming for something else. So where can we help and support the most? So just to kind of let you know what we're doing right now. So we help your students stay organized. We review their writing. Ideally, every college essay and every college supplement should be viewed by your counselor and pass our desk and have our eyes on it. Even if you're working with a parent, even if you're working with somebody else, because we have over 50 years of collective experience as an office. We've read tons of applications. We have helped come up with questions that the colleges are asking in terms of supplements. We've been on that side of the desk. So it's really important for us to really get an eye on those so that we can offer professional advice. We do this year to year. We have anecdotal information. We have data that we look at. It's a very data-driven process. So we understand that, you know, it's an art, not a science, but we also don't have a crystal ball. But a lot of our advice is very informed in terms of the experiences and the information and the data that we have here at Berkeley Carroll. We're realistic straight shooters and enthusiastic supporters. So a lot of the information and the advice that we're giving for students isn't necessarily like to steer students away from what it is that they really want or anything of that nature, but it's to provide options at the end of this process, right? We can never tell you where you can or cannot apply to, but we're gonna provide you with a lot of information for you to make an informed decision and to make sure that you have options at the end of this process and to make sure that you have the strongest application and that you're putting your best foot forward in terms of what it is that you're submitting. So like I said, we assist in balancing lists, brainstorming, editing essays, conducting mock interviews, assisting an organization, helping you decide, helping you prepare financial aid appeals, helping you prepare letters of continued interest. So we're with you every step of the way. We highly encourage all of you to lean into us as a support system whenever you need us, because that's exactly what we're here for, and we're excited to get you all to the end of this process.
All right, so I'm back with a coat though, because I got a little cold there. So to start wrapping up, we want to kind of leave you with some final thoughts and preparing for this exciting senior year. So what makes this year successful? And there are 4 points that I really want to highlight quickly. Engagement. Seniors, this is your process. So we want you to be engaged in that. That means coming and meeting with us, asking us questions. It is never a burden or an inconvenience for you to stop by. We think we're pretty friendly. Come to the college office, ask some questions. If you're concerned, if you don't know what to do next, we're here to support you. Engagement in coming to those college visits, signing up for virtual information sessions. This is your process and this is your next step. So we want you to feel engaged in it. And that also is in that partnership piece that we mentioned. We are here to support, to cheer you on, to pick you back up when it gets a little bit tough as well. So whatever we can do to best support you. If you're like, you know what, Ms. Chen, I really need you to give me hard deadlines and to stick with them, bet, I got you. So we are going to be a partner in this. So that also means honesty. We're going to be honest with you, and we want you to be honest with us about what you need in this. It's also going to be essential to have an open mind. I think sometimes we can fall in love with a particular school, and that's really exciting. But please know that not every student applies early decision. We encourage it. Mr. Amonte talked about the benefits of early decision for some process, but every year there are students that don't do ED. And that's because maybe they're not sure, they don't know what that path is going to be. So we ask you, especially those students, to have an open mind also about the schools that we recommend to you, about the schools that you may be admitted to. It might be that that school that you thought was your dream school, you go and visit in the spring in those admitted student events, and it actually was that school that you thought, I'm okay about, that ends up becoming the perfect match for you. So to approach this process, understanding things might shift. Who you are at the start of senior year might be a very different person than who you are at the end of it. And finally, to have patience in this process. So we like to think of this as not a sprint, but a marathon in a way with college admissions. And I am not so bold to have run a marathon myself, but I have cheered on my friends. And when talking with them about the process, there are those times when it gets a little bit rough, where you're questioning, am I going to make it to the end? But then you see all of the people with the cheers and the signs on the side of the streets pushing you on. And that's who we are. We're going to be there pushing you on. And that's who your parents and your guardians. But what I've really loved about my time at Berkeley Carroll is it's not just us as adults, but it's each other. That you are pushing on and you're supporting your peers, your classmates through this journey. So there might be a time when one of you finishes the race before the next person, and you are responsible to go back on the sidelines and help support that next person as they're finishing their path. So take care of yourselves in this process, take care of each other in this process, and know that you are on the right path and you're going to end up in a great place at the end. All right? So we want to wrap up. We have a little bit of time, I think, for some questions. So we want to open it up to you all here in person, anyone on Zoom as well, for any kind of big general questions. And of course, if you have any specific ones for your student, you're always welcome to make an appointment with us, as Mr. Almonte said earlier, rather than later, preferably. Yes. Yes. So that is going to be available in SCORE. So if you log into your SCORE account or you use Lakes, you'll be able to see there is a link that says visits and availability. If I go back a couple of slides real quick, here it is, visits and deadlines at the bottom left. And it will show all of the schools, what time they're visiting, the day they're visiting, and the location of the visit. Of course. Yes. Oh, Ms. Dunn also sends out emails about those pretty frequently. So a question over here.
Yeah, they can. So if you're admitted to a school and you want to defer a year, what you have to do is accept the offer, pay the enrollment deposit fee, which is that $500 to $1,000, depending on the school. And then you would have to complete a deferral request. And typically it's just a short application of just understanding why you're deferring for the year. So usually there has to be some type of reasoning, like the student's gonna work, or the student is gonna do an enrichment program, gonna take a gap year, things of that nature, and then the school will approve it. And then if that deferral request gets approved, the student would take off for the year, and then the following fall, they would take their spot as normal.
I think all the way at the top.
Do you recommend seeking it in an interview, or is it really vary depending on the school you're looking at?
You said, could you repeat the first part?
If you recommend trying to seek out, interviews?
Oh, yeah. So the question was, do we recommend seeking out an interview? So, if a school offers an optional interview, we definitely recommend it because it's an opportunity for you to learn more about the school and for the school to learn more about you. So some schools are gonna have informative interviews where it's the student going and they're speaking to a current student and they're using it as a tool to just ask questions. While other schools might have an optional evaluative interview where they want to get to know the student, want to get to know the applicant a little bit more. And it's a great opportunity for the student to expand on things in their application, show their personality, talk about new things of that nature. So, and it's also another form of demonstrated interest. In my career, in my experience, I used to conduct interviews when I worked at Lehigh. And interviews are really great, but I would say like not every student interviews really well. So knowing your strengths, preparing for that to try to walk in and have a really strong interaction. But there are some, I would say that if it's an evaluative interview, if it's not a great interaction, it can be something that's not a good thing to be considered in the application that will be considered by everybody reading it, because there's typically a write-up that goes in that application. But that's why we highly recommend that if any student's thinking of interviewing, that you do a mock interview with your counselor first before you do your first college interview. So that way we can ask questions, practice answers, get you confident. And then if we see anything that we think might be not the best interaction, we can advise you accordingly on whether we think it would be beneficial to interview or not. Awesome. So we don't want to steal any more of your time. Thank you so much for being a fabulous audience. Seniors, we look forward to supporting all of you throughout this process. Please set up meetings, please email us, parents. We look forward to connecting with all of you in the upcoming weeks, and we hope you all have a wonderful night.